Going from the point of the last live TV meal coverage, I literally woke up at 10 and did nothing but write the last live TV meal until 8 at night. With, I don't know, like 2 hours of break time for food and stuff. So yeah, it was a lot of writing. But then again, that should be expected. Once I finally finished that behemoth, my Aunt Hillary arrived from California for some Bethel mission trip, I think. And I hardly talked to her because I had to leave at that very instant for the vibe session previously ordained by the heavens. Though I suppose the heavens were not the biggest fan of the ordained plans because they gently wept during Grace and my trek to the Myers. But honestly, the drizzle made it so much better. Like, the world steeped in the smell of rain is just a glorious world. Plus, it made it, like, you know, a pretty temperate night, which was also very nice. So yeah, Grace and I drove to pick up the Myers. Things got a little discombobulated, and ironically, we showed up late to Southgate, where we originally were going to be stalling, but then we weren't early anymore. Anyway, I gathered the willing Myers in my car and then drove to Southgate, where we joined Noah and Renee, Grace's friend. I don't think she's been mentioned prior to this point, actually. Huh, interesting. Yeah, we drove up the canyon, playing loud music and smelling the glory of petrichor. That's technically what rain smells called. And it was great. However, once we got there, we found some people were sleeping in a camper near where we planned to set up, so we decided to go and sprout near the river instead. And man, it was such a better spot. The sound of the river just doing its thing actually made such a good atmosphere. And while you couldn't see the stars, which was sad, it was still super nice. Plus, I put together this playlist of my favorite instrumental songs that had like a tragic, peaceful, lighthearted combo vibe, and it made the vibe session that much better. So yeah, I really enjoyed that time, and it was really relaxing. I think the three girls were kind of distracted, and Benj kind of fell asleep. So I don't know who actually invibed the vibe session, but personally, I quite enjoyed it, even if the others didn't get much out of the experience, and that's all good. So yeah, the vibe session ended just as the rain was starting to pick up back again, and then we headed home. Once again, singing in the car as we went, and it was great. I think I need to appreciate... I think I need to appreciate that the people around me are just willing to drive into a canyon, sit in silence, listen to music, and then drive back. Like, how weird of an idea is that? I mean, I love it, but I grant it's an odd request. Anyway, on the way home, I packed for the long journey I was going to embark on soon, and then I promptly slept because it was late. The next day I woke up and began my aforementioned journey. See, Neo, Noah, and I had decided to go to a hell of a conference, that's actually the title, in Wisconsin, and in large part because Rashi would pay for our room and board, and thus all we had to do was pay for gas. And I mean, for me, that fact was sufficiently motivating, as I didn't really care for the conference itself, but I actually went for the drive. Because spending 16 hours driving is actually a pretty good deal. So, as far as I was concerned, I got 32 hours of driving and about 48 hours of conference, which, it seems kind of dumb to drive 32 hours for 48 hours of conferences, but for me, the arrangement sounds just fine, because the drive was why I went. Oh, never mind, there I say that. Why, might you ask, did I want to go for the drive? Well, because long drives are one of the best conversation conduits in existence. I mean, you still have to make a conscious effort to not, fall prey to the siren call of music or podcasts, but given those conditions obtained, deep conversations are all but guaranteed. Plus, it's also the perfect breeding grounds for lecturing, too. See, I did Catholic Talk Part 1 way back, and Neo had been pushing for Catholic Talk Part 2, and thus, with a captive audience, I bestowed such a talk upon them. But not only did I bestow it upon them, I also had them memorize it. And it took them a bit, but they actually did manage to do it. However, at least for Neo, I'm pretty confident knowledge has just been compartmentalized somewhere, because there have been a number of occasions at Ratio where I say something relevant to what I know he's memorized, and thus I'm all excited to see him use his superior knowledge, only for him to answer as if he never heard Catholic Talk Part 2. So I've been a bit disappointed, but what can you do? Anyway, Catholic Talk Part 2 was given, and at least partially absorbed, and then other conversations were had, to be sure. We also stopped at this Archway Museum. There was this ye old American museum that literally goes over the highway, and so kind of spur of the wind, I was like, we should go do that! And so we did. Honestly, probably one of the best museums I've been to. I mean, to be fair, I've been to very few museums. I tend to avoid them, like the plague. But this one had an escalator in it, so I had to go. Honestly, I think it was pretty well done. It was an interactive walkthrough museum where you got to use these audio devices, and there were lots of life-size models of things and very little reading. Plus, there was these very, very realistic wax figures, creepily realistic. There were definitely a few times where it turned out that I was like, look, someone else is here. And then I would realize they're just a wax figure. That place was a very good place for a horror film, now that I think about it. Anyway, the point is, it was a quality museum, and I enjoyed it. It was evening by the time our first stretch of drive ended. See, Neo's parents happened to live at a convenient halfway point in Lincoln, Nebraska. Thus, we decided that, at least on the way there, we would stay with them for the night. Thus, we met up with Neo's dad at a burger place, and he treated us to burgers, which was very nice. We then drove to their house, which was pretty close by, and it was super cozy. I actually really liked their house aesthetic. It was clean, but not with a lot of open space. I think houses with too much open space are vexing. So yeah, once there, Neo cut with his folks some, got to play some, I guess he got some Pokemon Go playing tips, and then Noah and I played some game of Magic before that happened. Then, once his parents headed to bed, he joined us, and we all played Magic till about 11 or so. I must say, Neo and Noah are some of my favorite people to play Magic with. They both just have really good attitudes and don't get salty, and it's just great. Then, once that ended, we made our way to bed, and I started trying to fall asleep at around midnight. Notice the word trying. So yeah, it turns out Neo's parents had purchased demon cots, and they were very skilled at their craft of torture. See, they, like all high-level demons, seem to be good and pure. The cots, bless their soul, were slanted upward near the head, so that, in theory, one might even not need a pillow to enjoy a pleasant night's sleep. And not only that, but they were concave, kind of like a hammock, so as to envelop your body and bring it safely to sleep. Or so the demon cots wish one to believe. But in truth, the very features that drew one in were the very instruments they used to torture the souls of those that were unfortunate enough to fall prey to their deception. For you see, the incline near the head necessitated one slightly slant upward, bending near the abdomen, which I assure you is already uncomfortable. But what was really impressive is these demon cots simultaneously provided sufficient enough slant that if you used a pillow, your head would be angled too high. Yet, at the very same time, an insufficient enough slant that you could not rest the head on the cot itself without craning one's neck downward. Thus, pillow or no, the demon cots ensured your neck would be at a very uncomfortable angle. I think you're beginning to see why these are no ordinary demon cots. But that was not all. In addition, the cots were also very narrow, about the width of my shoulders, and should I lay flat on my back, they were short enough that my knees would have to bend so I would not dangle my feet over the edge. Thus, with the curvature of the canvas kept in mind, when I wished to sleep on my side, my knees, which I will remind you need to be scrunched due to the cot's inadequate length, end up being at an upward angle of 30 degrees or so. While the length of my body was kept in the cot, my knees extended beyond the side, and thus, of course, were elevated. Hence, in total, my hips were rotated due to my knees, my spine angled because of the slant, my neck craned because of the pillow, or lack thereof. All of which, in total, as one might imagine, resulted in quite a torturous night and very little sleep. Why I did not flee my demon cot captors and find refuge on the carpeted floor, I shall never know. But for some reason, during my agony, I never even had that thought cross my mind. Now, of course, this all begs the question, why would a holy and loving cot factory create such evil cots? Well, after much thought, I have come up with what I deem a convincing theodicy. See, if one were to suppose that humans have a telos to sleep on their back, then the cots and their bizarre properties would all make sense. One would not need to turn on one's hips, for one's knees to not go over the side and, instead down the center line. The angle of one's spine would be comfortable, as our spines naturally bend toward the abdomen, and the back of one person's head would rest nicely against the sloped canvas. In fact, features like the concave nature of the canvas and the sloping of the cot would not only be permissible, but in fact good, given such a state. And of course, the good and loving cot factory knew this, and thus created the cots for our good, but we, through our free sleeping posture, have corrupted the good cots, and turned them into a great evil, all the while blaming the cot factory as if it were not our own choice that brought upon us this agony. So this sleepless night I discovered two things. First, that the demons we perceive around us are often of our own creation. And second, that slanted and curved cots suck. They were actually just the worst. Next time you see a curved cot, you need to get some gasoline and a match and just burn it. Trust me, if the owner of the cot had ever slept in it, they would know and they would thank you. Maybe they even compensate you for your great deed that you brought to the world. Those cots were just the absolute worst. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I got really bad sleep that night for the amply explained reasons, and thus ended up with something like 3 hours of sleep, though, it very well may have been less. Hence, I was sleep deprived from waking the next day. Thus, after a few morning pleasantries, we got on the road again. But instead of doing Catholic Talk Part 3 due to my condition, we instead heard the great tale of Neo, aka he gave his life story, which took like 7 hours, so pretty thorough. Though it was one of my personal goals on the trip, though, to actually get to know Neo better. So, yeah. I haven't had many deep conversations with him prior to that point. So I was able to check that off the bucket list. The reason why Neo and I haven't had many deep conversations is Neo and I just kind of found each other. I didn't hunt him down like most of my friends. Unless the question weaving stage that I've gone through with most people just never happened. So yeah, got to hear his story in more detail, and that was really good. After that was wrapping up, we finally reached the conference early, found our rooms, and a notable deficit of towels. If absences can be perceived, as Jean-Paul Sartre claimed, then the absence of towels was very perceivable. Anyway, we got situated, and when we attended the conference, we heard one of the speakers talk about post-mortem opportunity. There wasn't actually a hell talk per se, it was more like a let's make a hell a bit nicer talk. After that, I played chess with Ethan and got soundly beat the second game. The first game was close, but he was just better than me, so, that was humbling, especially because it was Ethan. We then got to sleep, and it was okay. However, Ethan decided vaulting himself on the top bunk was the best way to ascend and descend from his resting place, and said vaulting was not conducive to my personal rest, so that was the downside. The next day, I was just listening to speakers do the thing, which was actually a lot better than I thought it would be. We listened to the talks for RC development, and they were a lot worse than I expected, though, so it kind of equaled out. They did give us food, which was a perk. Plus, seeing all the nerds around me made me feel super normal, which is great. There were people with literally full hoodies and dresses which screamed anime, which I found simultaneously very cool and also a bit disconcerting. I am nothing on the weeb scale compared to some of those people. Still, I'm once again getting the sneaking suspicion that that I never had a choice in my hobbies, but rather I've just fallen into the nerd rut, which was secretly like controlling me from the shadows all this time, and from which I might never escape. Either that, or One Punch Man is just a really good show, and so people like it. Whichever one is true, I nevertheless did not talk to said weebs. It really wasn't much of an environment for conversation, and everyone was kind of like pretty cookie. So yeah, that evening as dinner approached its end, me, Neo, Noah, and I decided we would best head out now instead of staying another night because both Noah and I had school the next day. And as things were going, the earliest we could get home was like midnight, which is not a good day to start school. Like, you don't want to fall asleep at midnight. Thus, we left early so we could stop over at Neo's parents once again and get some good sleep the night before. Thus, we departed. On our way back, I gave the final part of the Catholic Talk, Catholic Talk Part 3, which justifiably had a very sobering effect. Only those who have heard Catholic Talk Part 3 will know, but the predicament is not a rosy one. However, after like 4 hours of that, Neo was called by a wife in distress, and thus that occupied a good portion of our time. Then after we dived into some personal topics, the content, of course, I cannot divulge, and Neo's parents, and we got to Neo's parents' house by like 4 at night. This time I was spared from the cot, or perhaps from myself, and thus I slept beautifully. The next morning was chill. We went on our way, and Noah and I gave our life stories. However, oddly, I did not really enjoy sharing mine. Perhaps it felt like Neo wasn't really listening, or I don't know, maybe something else. But either way, I just didn't enjoy the process. Regardless, I did my due diligence and told a tale, and when we arrived back at home, it was a good trip overall, but I was definitely happy to be home. Upon my arrival, I did my best to relax, showed Mom some One Punch Man, which was actually way more sketch than I remembered. I mean, it's really funny, but I actually can't recommend that show in good conscience anymore because there's some scenes. Anyway, regardless, the time was enjoyable and I felt relaxed. I didn't do much else that day, but that's how the day went. I got some good sleep that night. The next day, I got to sleep in, which was a novelty, but also very good. I then regained the regime and routine wherein I worked, did school, and did the typical day. Once I got home, I attended family dinner, after which I went to Ratio and taught Sean and his girlfriend, Sean, and his girlfriend Thomism, because, them being Catholic, Thomism is kind of essential for their well-being. The following day I did school, though the day was different from others, and I got a pleasant surprise with Jake asking for an argument for God's existence, which was cool. So I did some more work at school, and once I got home, I went to Joe's house for Tuesday night things. I did some stuff with magic cards while I was there, and I also compiled all my decently written papers, only to just disappointingly discover they only number 58. I actually thought I'd written so much more than that, and I mean, I have, but they're not good. I've only written 58 papers in my lifetime that I deem, maybe acceptable today. That's pretty sad. I need to work on improving that count. Anyway, compiled those, and for those interested, you can let me know, and I can send you that list. After I finished that, I played some more Magic before we went on a drive, just like the good old days. The drive was actually not that good, but, whatever. And then that was how the day ended. The next morning, I took a little time to start working on making a fancy face decoration for my clock. I spent like an hour and a half, and it only got me 1% credit. So in hindsight, that was definitely a waste of time. But regardless, I spray painted some metal pieces and went to math tutoring as they dried. When I actually got to math tutoring, I was literally the only student there, so I basically got a private lesson from Anthony, my Captain America-esque math teacher. And honestly, he is really good at explaining math. I actually got to talk to him about some non-school related stuff, since it was just us, and apparently he's like a math prodigy. Like, he just instinctively gets it, and is basically doing his PhD in math just because it was easy for him. Funnily, he would have actually gotten his degree way earlier, but it just so happened that while he was in high school, he asked his math teacher what was beyond calculus, and his math teacher said, I don't know if there's anything beyond calculus. And so Anthony just pursued a different degree for like 2 years because he's like, I've conquered all of math. It was only by happenstance that he encountered linear algebra or something like that, and he realized there was more math out there to learn, and so he dropped his degree halfway through and got a math degree. Kind of crazy story, actually. Especially, like, if he had just done a tiny bit of research, then he could have, not wasted 2 years of his life. But I guess that goes to show that high school teachers do really mold the rising generation. I wonder how many things like that exist for me. Like, for how many things I've just been shaped by people in my life, without even knowing it, and how different I would be if I hadn't been. I don't know. Interesting counterfactual to ponder, but at the same time, a completely unprofitable one. Have you ever thought about how it would be really interesting if you could just simulate counterfactuals? Like, if you could just run a simulation to figure out what would actually happen if you really did try and outrun a cop in your 2100 Accord. Purely random example, of course. I wonder if knowing that sort of thing would actually help in the long run, though, because you could just, spend so much time running mental simulations you fail to make good decisions because you were trying to just make the best decision. Though none of this is relevant at all to the topic at hand. But nevertheless, there you go. Free food for thought. You are welcome. Moving on, after talking with Anthony, I then went home, ate my equivalent of breakfast, and watched some anime as I did so. I then did work, studied something I don't quite remember, then did more work, finally took some tests I don't quite remember, and I showed up at Neo's house for our usual hang time. We finished Patient Moriarty, finally, and then once I got home, I finished my extra credit clock face before going to bed. Thursday I had class, worked on doing the finishing touches to my clock since my 11 o'clock class was canceled at the last minute. I then walked into the lab, turned in my clock, and finally put an end to that project of death. Of course, it was only a 1 credit course, but, it's actually been so much work and stress. I don't know how to assess credits, but they clearly need to rethink their metric. After I finished anime I was watching, and that was great because it was honestly a very good anime. Oh no, sorry, it was a very trash anime as far as anime goes. Old and mess story, not a good combo. However, after that, I then proceeded to go and do escape room with Morgan. So here's the, there's this cool bar with, escape rooms in the basement. They're kind of like mini escape rooms, half the time. But honestly, this one was pretty good. The room was clue-based, and we had to deductively rule out people until we found the murderer, the weapon, and the place. And we failed, but we got really darn close. There were only two clues away. We were only 2 clues away. And honestly, the reason we didn't find them was kind of dumb, but whatever. It was a good time, and I think Morgan really enjoyed it. But I'm not entirely sure. On my way home, my car was like, I refuse to accelerate if you have your headlights on. So, while I at first viewed this as unreasonable behavior and scolded the Phoenix, once I got home and Morgan left, I discovered it was simply crankly because I left the battery terminals corroded, and thus, it wasn't getting its daily dose of electric goodness that ever-growing car needs. Hence, I eventually cleaned those terminals, and its foul mood ended, which I was very grateful for. So, that's how I fixed my car. Then, that Wednesday, a very, very glorious thing happened. I went to Magic Club, and this guy, also named Alex ironically, actually a leader before me, who was named Alex too. I guess Alex is just born to rule over their fellow nerds. What can I say? Anyway, a guy named Alex agreed to become club president, which was actually fantastic. So without further ado, I handed the title off to him because honestly, it was just a title. Some of the guys at club didn't even know I was the president. That shows you how much respect I got. And I haven't been to club since. See, prior to my resignation, I would come to Magic Club basically out of obligation as president because honestly, I didn't really enjoy playing with people. I mean, sure, I enjoy the game, but the game is only as good as the people you play with. And I'm pretty sure that I've ranted about this at least once before, so that's all I'll say about that. So yeah, instead, I've been able to spend the entirety of each Wednesday with Neo, which I have enjoyed far more, and thus I am very happy with this development. So, as one might expect given the sentence I just uttered, I then spent the rest of the day with Neo, after which I slept. Thursday, I cleaned up the EMEC because if I didn't, I would fail the class, which is not something I'm particularly fond of doing. That doesn't mean I'm not getting increasingly apt at doing so. Failing, that is. Once I got home, I just did a small chore things. I then had work and classes and got introduced to the idea of Product Lab, which is a space where you can, do actually 10,000 3D prints. They have 33 printers, and they give you free PLA for $20 for the semester. Actually a fantastic deal. I then fixed my car by cleaning its battery terminals, as previously described. And then, once I finished that, I took a bath and watched some anime before going to Joe's and deck building, and then playing Magic with Sam, while the rest of ye old folks watched some insignificant movies. Sam was pretty fun to 1v1, I must say. And then, once that elapsed, I slept. Saturday, I, out of my deep affection for the Million Mountaineering Club, which supersedes my deep affection for sleep, arose at 6:45 a.m. to go on a hike. However, honestly, this hike was pretty lame. It was Chris, Molly, me, and 2 new girls, one of which was Cable's girlfriend, though Cable wasn't there, which is pretty ironic. But anyway, it had been a year or so since my last hike with him, and so I tried to fall back into my old rut of interaction, namely question weaving, but of course, not genesis my, Alex 2.0 nature. Anyway, Molly kind of hyped my question weaving up on the drive there, and also there was definitely some awkward silences, so I decided to step in and do my thing. It's not like I did badly. In fact, at one point in the trip, they actually commented on my question weaving and said it was very skillful, which I appreciate. But, as I was talking to Cable's girlfriend, it was life was just sucked out of me. It could be the fact that since she is radically, charismatic in her leanings, I was okay, well, actually, let me full stop there. It could be the fact she was radically charismatic. As many of you know, I have a particularly low tolerance for the charismatic approach to life and theology. There's this whole anthology I could give about why, but regardless, the charismatics rubbed me the wrong way. But assuming it wasn't just she was charismatic, it's likely because when I was asking her questions and trying to probe her soul, she just regurgitated her testimony. See, that's the thing charismatics do a lot, share their testimony, and she's quite charismatic, so she has shared her testimony, I guarantee, 100 times. Thus, she was in a unique situation because, unlike most people who haven't thought about how to narrate their life, she not only had done so, but had basically been forced to. So when I asked, what's your life story, it was as if I hit the, play button on the recording in her brain, and thus she's proceeded to give me the same story she'd probably given thousands of others so many times before. And I felt like, I gave her a nice handcrafted card, asking to get to know her better, and she returned one of those store-bought cards with a fixed message and signed her name at the bottom, all while acting as if she, expertly fulfilled my request. Honestly, I found it extremely off-putting. I can understand if you don't want to be vulnerable with a complete stranger you met today. Heck, I'm not even saying that's, not wise, but don't give me a memorized speech about your past that clearly does not emotionally impact you in any way whatsoever. And beyond that, it wasn't even, thought through. Look, I'm the kind of guy that can appreciate a heartless rendition of your past, given you've actually scrutinized it and actually realized what's going on there. That's the equivalent of an actually, funny store-bought, joke card or something, with a really good inspiring quote. Sure, it doesn't have that personal touch or any feeling in it, but at least it's well done. Her testimony was not that, though. She didn't really do introspection, and she didn't really understand why she did what she did. And, aspects of past wounds still affect her and what characteristics, were core to her being. None of that. And when I tried to explore those areas and actually make her think, she'd just be like, yeah, I don't know. Or give some super surface level answer before going back to the recording. It was immensely vexing. Hence, when in turn I was asked to share, because that's usually how those things go, I felt a tangible repulsion to the notion. Like, it's probably the most resistant I've been to being remotely vulnerable I can remember in like the last 3 years. Hence, I tried to get out of it, but, it's tough when the circumstances are as they were. Thus, I gave an extremely truncated and soulless rendition of my past and tried to move on as fast as possible. Even then, it was still quite unpleasant. Now, it's not to say nothing good came out of the hike. Chris got stopped by 3 police cars for illegally holding an antler and got a warning put on his permit record, so that was good. But that testimony, regurgitation experience, like, soured the rest of the hike for me. Plus, the other new girl was a freshman that Cable's girlfriend didn't really know, but was trying to be significantly friendly with, which is cool, don't get me wrong. And it was obvious she was, like, significantly emotionally hurting, so I tried to, like, bring about some conversation, maybe help initiate some healing. But then everyone else just joined in like they knew what they were doing. And maybe it's just my hubris talking, but I think I developed a skill set for helping hurting people. It's kind of like surgery. You gotta do it just right, or else, the wound just gets worse. And I'm not going to say I'm a master at it, but I'm convinced there is a skill set to be had. And while I appreciate the good intent of others, they did not exercise that skill set. So yeah, that was also just vexing. Like, this girl is genuinely hurting and needs help, and you're all just, like, making things worse. So yeah, that also made the trip rough. I hit the end of my emotional battery about that last bit of the hike, and thus the rest of the conversation were mostly small talk to fill the awkward silences. Questions like, would you rather be tasked with building a functional plane, or be killed if you didn't, would you be killed with, and be killed if you didn't complete it in 5 years, or fight an angry gorilla? An absolutely meaningless question, of course, but nevertheless a valiant attempt by Molly to fill the void, and thus I appreciate it. Ha, stupid as it was. And yeah, we drove back down after eating chai tea, and I was very happy once we parted ways. Once I got home, I worked through Majesty of Reason's video on Bayes' theorem, which is actually revolutionary, by the way. If you haven't watched it, it's mandatory you do so, because it's extremely likely you're thinking it probably all wrong. He gives this example to start just to drive home the point, which I will now give to you. A woman is a member of a demographic where the odds of having cancer are 1%. She goes and gets tested by a machine that has an accurate diagnosis probability of 90%. The test returns positive. What are the odds she actually has cancer? Answer? 8%. I know. You're thinking, like, the test came back positive, and there's a 90% chance it's accurate, so it should be 90%. I know, I thought that too, but it's actually so wrong. And to understand why, you need to watch Majesty of Reason's video on Bayes' theorem. I actually, like, totally had my whole view probably flipped on its head for me. Anyway, I watched that video and then took a bath and watched some anime, because my brain was dead. Oh, and while I watched that video, which is like a 4-hour video, by the way, I weaved chainmail the whole time. And I finished like 6 inches of weave. So yeah, that process is so time consuming. I mean, that's in part because, like, I take the time to make sure every single, like, link is super solid. Because, it only takes one rogue link to make the whole thing unravel. But still, actually such a slow process. That said, I finally finished the one side of the chainmail shirt, and now for the other side. After that, I called with Liam, and after which I called with Sydney, and after that, I watched some more anime, and then after that, I talked with Grace, and then I went to bed. The next day I went to church, taught magic to someone, I can't remember who, but I think it was a female. I then went to lunch brunch activities early, I left lunch brunch activities early and arrived at Neil and Sydney's because their employer had arrived. See, somehow Sydney had stumbled across this poster in the theater building asking for a nerd to cosplay in her daughter's wedding, which happened to be a nerd wedding. Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. Basically, her daughter decided to just embrace her nerddom, the nerddom of her many friends as well, and hold an extravagant nerd wedding. There were to be 12 tables, each with a different nerd theme, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, etc. And then, when the dance began, she would have 4 cosplayers from those various nerd categories go and mingle with the guests for an hour. Now, see, she was willing to pay each cosplayer $300 for their hour of service, which I surmise is what made Sydney so enthusiastic about the idea. But needless to say, it was going to be a very nerdy wedding. And Sydney figured our group of 4, herself, Neo, John, and I, were a very perfect match. And I'm not saying we weren't, but Neo and I definitely were pretty hesitant originally. But once I discovered that there would be a D&D table and that I could play my favorite Dragonborn wizard, Thales, my resistance levels dropped to negligible levels, while Neo's remained pretty constant. But I mean, come on. I couldn't say no after figuring I could play Thales. Like, I actually love that character. Hence, the employer lady arrived at Neo and Sydney's house to talk things over and give them the aforementioned permitted nerved factions as well as other details, and thus I arrived early. So essentially, we all agreed, though Neo quite reluctantly, to cosplay for the wedding. However, unfortunately, I'm just going to say this now because it's relevant. We didn't end up actually going to the gig because apparently the woman's daughter reneged on her desire for our attendance, and hence we were subsequently fired from our hirement. Though, of course, only after I dropped $110 on my wizard costume. So now I have a costume that's, like, not the return on investment I expected. However, we decided we were going to go to a Renaissance fair just, so we could make use of our otherwise wasted money. So yeah, I would have been hired as a wizard, but instead I was fired as a wizard. Life is hard, and then you get fired from wizarddom. So yeah, of course, we didn't know we would get fired, so we all conspired. See what I did there with that rhyme? Concerning the upcoming matrimonial event, which I would still want to go to, just saying. Like, even if I'm not a wizard, I just like to attend a nerd wedding, with a ratio of, like, nerd to wedding being clearly 3-1 in nerd's favor. And thus the sweet delight of nerddom would no doubt diminish the bitter taste of wedding that accompanies it. I need a nerd wedding in my life now. Maybe I should beseech Joe in Korea. Joe, you're my dude. Make my dreams come true. Anyway, after the wedding, lady left. I then played D&D as per usual. However, unlike usual, at the end of that, Neo took Sydney to the ER because she was experiencing a burning sensation on the left side of her body. And though we didn't notice at the time, it turns out Sydney actually has MS. So that was the first really big telltale sign. So yeah, that's been a yike. At this point, she's a lot better and a lot less pain. But I'm going to be honest, it's been a pretty rough process. Thank God she has insurance for being a teacher, though, because, like, as I write this, the running total for tests and treatments is over $50,000. And somehow they haven't paid a cent of that sum, which is absolutely a godsend. So yeah, I mean, if she had to get diagnosed, this was definitely the right time. But then again, there's no real right time to get diagnosed with MS. Anyway, there will be a few more occasions where Sydney leaves the picture for medical reasons, and so I probably won't explain it every time, but that's why. A lot went down with the whole MS diagnosis and treatment process. I don't remember all the details, but overall it's been rough, so if you want to send us some prayers her way, I'm pretty sure she would appreciate it. After Sydney was taken to the hospital, John and I, since there was nothing we could really do to help her, decided just to hang out, grab some food, and met at this place to play Magic, and just catch up, and it was really good. John knows this guy is like a classic cowboy, shoot the government while we smoke cigars kind of guy. And it sounds like seeing him again was a total blast for him. Cowboy Man's family is really similar to Moon's family, if you remember him from the trip, and also just super welcoming by the sound of it. So I think it kind of instilled in John a sort of goalpost that he wants to set for his family and community to look like in the future someday. So that was really cool. Anyway, it was just really good catching up with John and hearing about the stuff that's happening in his life, and I really enjoyed that time. Plus, I got to beat him with my ultimate Magic deck, so that was fun too. Then, finally, once I wrapped up, I caught up with Magic Reason and proceeded to go to bed. The next day was a snow day, which normally would be great, but seeing as I didn't know it was a snow day until I woke up at my usual time, so I didn't really get to sleep in, and then literally spent the next 5 hours and 30 minutes doing homework, with an hour break in there, so I guess 4 hours and 30 minutes doing homework. It was just as bad or worse than a usual day, and thus I did not enjoy the snow day almost at all. Nevertheless, I did get to play Magic with Joe, and also got up with him, so I guess the snow day did afford me some extra hours that turned out to be significant, so I should be grateful nonetheless. After Joe and I talked and drove around for quite some time, I joined my family hanging out with Noah and Melissa, and I swear every time I see them, I'm shocked by how odd they are. Not odd in a bad way, just odd in an interesting way. I honestly do not know how I always expect them to be normal people, and I'm reminded every single time I see them, they are very much not that. Anyway, I mostly listened and worked on chainmail as the conversation evolved. At one point, the topic came to my chainmail weaving, and I ended up showing Noah the nunchucks I had made, if you remember those, and it turns out he really likes nunchucks. He played with them for the entire rest of the night. After I brought them out, that is. And so at the end of it, I was like, Noah, why don't you just keep them? Because all they were doing is hanging up on some nails in my dungeon. And so after a bit of persuasion, he agreed. And I will tell you, there is no one that could possibly have given those nunchucks more love than Noah. This is a step out of the timeline, but I was recently at his house, and the nunchucks were literally on his bedside table. It wasn't along with 7 other things either. It was his phone, a glass of water, and the nunchucks. And this is 2 months after I gave it to him. So yeah, that made me pretty happy. They were mega beat up, but despite heavy use, they still hadn't broken. So I called that a win. So yeah, Noah adopted the nunchucks I made and then left. Once they had gone, I basically finished the anime I was going through and went to bed. The next day, the snow had evaporated because that's how Colorado be, and it was back to the grind. I did classes in the morning, stopped by home for a food break, but back to classes where Anthony just did all of our DiffyQ homework for us, and then my CAD lab, I worked on some more. After that, I think I did something with Magic Gathering, my wizard deck. Honestly, I can't remember. And then as per Tuesday activities, I watched some more Bofuri. I think there's a reason it's my most rewatched anime, which isn't true anymore. Played some Magic and then did some Pokemon Go. And then I went home and slept. Wednesday morning began with me doing stuff in the EMAC. I then bought some costume stuff for my wizard gig that never occurred. And then after some food and anime, I went and did classes and went on a run. I then went over to Neo's for Wednesday night stuff, and it was rough over there because Sydney was basically just figuring out she had MS, and thus the evening was very tense. Sydney was actively cutting my hair. She was telling us about her diagnosis, and while I do feel bad that all I could think about was her haphazard snipping at my hair during a very emotional moment, I'll be honest, that was the forefront of my mind. Don't get me wrong, I was listening, but for some reason, Sydney insisted on cutting my hair at the exact moment, and I suspected this to be a poor decision, but I agreed, in order to give her a semblance of normalcy. But of course, she was crying as she was cutting my hair, and she just kept doing it. Which, I mean, totally understandable if you're crying under circumstances, but she just kept cutting my hair as she was breaking down into tears. So, first of all, it was an awkward position to be in. And second, the more emotional she got, I hope you can understand, the more concerned it became about, what she was doing to my hair. So, yeah, I feel bad about, that's what I was concerned about, but, it was a hard time for all of us. Anyway, after the hair cutting, she decided that she wanted us to watch this musical called Jesus something. See, I hated it so much, I blocked the name from my memory, and it was one of the worst things I've ever watched. It's supposed to be a show where Jesus comes into modern day, but the theology is super screwed up. Jesus is a deuce and sleeps around. Jesus is the hero. Jesus is deluded in believing he's God, etc. And so the heretical rendition of Jesus was actually tangibly repulsive. On top of that, it was a musical, and I generally just don't enjoy musical. And there were sketch outfits. Like, it was all around just the worst. But of course, given the diagnosis, not like 30 minutes before, I couldn't just say no. So I stayed out for about like an hour before I had to actually leave. After an hour of that show, I just did not care about the social consequences. I could not keep watching that movie. Honestly, it was kind of a unique experience having such a strong repulsion to a movie, but I generally just could not watch it anymore. So yeah, that was horrible. I then went home, had Dad trim up my hair, and took a shower to reset, plus, remove the hair. And then just as I got back, the movie ended. Thus, for the rest of the night, Neo and I played Magic, which was a good way to end an otherwise pretty sucky day. The next day, basically all I did was school and homework. Like, actually, I woke up at 9 in the morning and did school things until 9:30 at night. I took 2 breaks for 2 meals, and that was it. It was rough. But hey, I got a lot done, so, that was good. Once I finally finished all my work, I then sorted instrumental playlists before going to bed. The day thereafter, I went to the EMEC for my Haas exam. Now, by all lights, I was in no way prepared for that exam, but it just so happened that the girl I suspect to have a crush on me, Leanne, was there. And so, while I was waiting, she offered to prepare me for the exam, since she had already taken it. And thanks to her very thorough training, I was actually able to do really well in the exam, and I now have a Haas certification, aka a piece of paper that says, this guy can press buttons in a particular order depending on the nature of the task. So yay! You wish you were button certified like me. I then went home, ate, and watched some anime. I worked, did classes, knurled my second screwdriver, only to discover I had actually knurled my first screwdriver correctly. So yeah, I'm good at my job. I then made a plastic injection screwdriver, which wasn't difficult because plastic injection. I then went home and did something apparently insignificant enough to warrant me forgetting to record it. And that, was it. The next morning was a Saturday morning, but alas, there was no sleeping to be had as I had a previously arranged to sew with Karina and Johanna day. Thus, I rose the designated time, met up with them, proceeded to sew from like 10 to 4 in the afternoon. Honestly, sewing is a lot easier than I thought it would be. Not easier in the sense that I was good at it, but easier in the sense that it wasn't complicated. Upon writing that out, I realized the word I was looking for was in fact simpler. But of course, to admit that would make me seem dumb. So instead I will maintain that the word I meant to say was easier, and it contains a unique nuance that the word simple clearly lacks. As to what that particular nuance might be, I don't need to bother to extrapolate upon it, because your plebeian mind would find it so esoteric it would be a waste of my time. So yes, sewing was good. I did it badly, but I improved as the day went on. I decided diagonal zippers are in fact cool, and a very large side pockets are in fact not. Also, I would say I made a sweatshirt, but with the aforementioned qualities, but it's far more accurate to say Karina and I made a sweatshirt with the aforementioned qualities. Hence why she doesn't want me to sew again, because she ended up just kind of babysitting Johanna and I. Still, the finished product wasn't half bad. Also, played some Magic 1v1s with Sam, and honestly lost way more times than I would like to admit, so I won't! I got home, ate food, watched some anime, played what has been deemed Speed Seek, the CSU game, where I'm on blades trying to find and catch people, with most people from Ratio, and they seem to enjoy it, save Liam. Once that was done, I watched some anime with Grace, called Liam, and we had a pretty good battle anime quiz, though I don't remember who actually won, and thus ended the day. Sunday, I went to church, as per usual, after we played Magic, which is also usual. Once Magic ceased, I went to UNC's for a typical game of D&D, and I had some really epic moments with really lots of odds of occurring, so that was pretty great. I then stuck around, and we now including Alan, all talked about what we wanted B-Side to be like in the future. We came to some conclusions. I don't remember what they were particularly, but Alan has written them down somewhere. Then after that talk, Braden and Maddie came over, and we all played Emperor, a version of Commander Magic the Gathering, and it was fairly fun. I almost killed Braden, but then he summoned like 50 or so flyers and very much leveled my teams I was at. The next day was Monday, so the cycle began once again. I started the day with some math, tutoring, and study, did work and homework, classes, more work, and some more homework before going to Ratio, and finally doing no homework during Ratio. Instead, I played old Flash games. Well, the Catholic priest was actually being like very pastoral. It was bad though, partially because he was being pastoral in a Catholic-y way to a Protestant audience, which is thus rhetorically awful, and also partially because I know more about his faith, at least technicalities of it, than he did. So yeah, that was rough. Plus, we got one of our members, a girl named Melissa, who just really sunk her claws into him in a very uncharitable manner, so that was hard to watch. The uncharitable bit, that is. I don't think her points were very good. After the pastoral talk, I wanted to talk to Alan about important things, but he denied my request on grounds of lack of brain power, so instead I just caught up with him and what's going on in his life. That was good. Once I got home, I watched a bit of anime before going to sleep. The next day, during classes, I discovered my midterm for my Mech 200A had its due date shifted back a week, which is a very big yay because I think it's so much work. And then I did my usual Tuesday class routine before going to Joe's, eating food, and progressing to our Bofuri rewatch. Playing some Magic as Ben, Caleb, and Ben watched the Monty Python movie and the Holy Grail, and then playing a bit more Magic once I finished. Then, of course, I went to bed because it was late. Wednesday, I did work on my screwdriver, which, I never showed you guys pictures of, or my clock, so I'm going to do that. Here's what I slaved throughout the semester to make. There you go. Those are the projects that took like 50 hours of my life. I understand they're unassuming, but those pieces of metal are very precisely shaped, okay? After working on the screwdrivers, I then did CAD homework until the computer was just like, no. So that was weird. I just couldn't log in, and they just immediately logged me back out. So I don't really want to talk about my times I tried the cycle of logging in and logging back out before I realized it just wasn't going to work. So I won't. I then met with Neo for our usual Wednesday night stuff, and when we went on a walk to gather the traditional King Super supplies, we then started a new anime since we finished the Moriarty the Patriot, and it apparently traumatized Sydney. Sorry about that, Sydney. And then after watching some of that, me and Neo started this tabletop version of Magic, though it never got past the prototyping stages. I think that's in large part due to my lack of enthusiasm, though. Like this whole semester, I've been feeling a lot more drained. Well, the semester before, I was like thriving. This one is definitely more of a survival situation. Thus, I haven't really had the energy to put into doing inventive stuff. Regardless, I gave it a shot. The next day, I took an ECE Preemie, aka the test before the test, but it still counts for the actual test unless you want to redo it. And I got a perfect score, so I felt pretty great. I then came home and watched some anime as I ate before going to my lab section since it was Thursday. While there, I got done pretty early and just spent a lot of time networking, aka getting to know my classmates. I previously underestimated how much being rough acquaintances with your classmates can benefit you, but my encounter with Leanne gave me a crash course, where she gave me a crash course for the Haas exam, really opened my eyes to the value of knowing people. Thus, I put some effort in, and I would say I did very well. After the Alex 2.0 revolution, I'm able to just like adjust my bubbly levels to the right specifications to meet my needs. Feel the power. Oh, I can feel it. After networking, I then took my second DiffyQ exam, which I walked out thinking I aced, and of course that means I got a 67! So that was no less disappointing than every other time I walked out of an exam confident I did great, only to discover I did not do great. Once I got home, I then went on YouTube, where all the really cool free softwares you should have on your computers were told to me via YouTube videos. And I now have a lot of really cool free softwares on my computer. And then I also managed to do a bit of work to get my old LEGO Universe game on my computer and start playing that. See, back when I was like 11, LEGO released what was at the time a really high quality game called LEGO Universe. I remember really loving it as a kid. However, not too long after its release, it got shut down for reasons I still don't know. And thus, of course, my childhood self was quite sad. Hence, I just so happened to bump into this guy at church, and there was one copy of the developer. Oh, and he was one of the developers for the game, and also had access to a Discord server where the copy of the game was still stored. So I was pretty stoked. And while it took a bit of work, I was actually able to get it to run on my computer, and so that was actually really cool. Anyway, all that techie stuff took quite some time, so by the time I had it all done, the waking hours of my day had elapsed. Next morning, I discovered the grade I received my previous DiffyQ exam, and I also found out I'm not permitted to use the EMAG for hobby projects, and that was a very big sad to start the day. However, I did also schedule my training with the Idea Project Lab, aka 3D printing lab, so at least something good happened. I then did CAD work in the computer lab and went to work and then class before taking Eat Easy at home because I had some time to kill. And during said easy taking, I played some LEGO Universe, listened to Pies Aquinas, and also took a break to watch some anime and eat food. Then, per my spontaneous request that I had issued but hours before, the Myers clan plus Noah arrived at my house for a game of Speed Seek. However, it did not go great because the girls were wimps and wouldn't go around CSU alone. And Ben and Ben just played Pokemon Go the whole time while spending super obscure pictures with very few exceptions. Seth joined my team and wasn't able to keep up. Thus, the game was a bit of a dud. Should we do it again? Which I hope we will. We know what to improve upon. Still, glad it happened. I think, we could have some really good games in the future. We weren't able to play very long because the young ones had to get home early. Thus, after they left, I decided to work on editing my AMV using another free software that, from my perspective, is just straight better than Premiere Pro. The main reason I say that is because everything is super intuitively labeled, is easy to find, so I didn't have to look up a tutorial. And, when I did, like I did when I was using Premiere for every function. So yeah, that was pretty fun, honestly, and I got the hang of it really fast. Next morning was a Saturday, and it was the first morning in literal months where I didn't just know what to do with myself. See, ever since the start of semester, every single Saturday or just day full stop had been taken having 8 hours had been taken. So having 8 hours of unscheduled free time was pretty odd. The problem with time and gaps like that is you want to start something and be proactive, but you can't start a really meaningful project zone of time. So it ended up me just being kind of lazy. Yeah. Anyway, that morning I played the LEGO Universe while listening to Soul Scripture debate between Trent Horn and Gavin Ortland, and maybe I've just been indoctrinated by the Catholics, but Gavin's points seemed really bad, to be honest, and I feel like the whole debate was just very uninformative. I then realized that the note I made to myself about the advising meeting wasn't an advising meeting, but it was telling me to register for classes. So I was supposed to register for classes that time. Thus, I tried to figure out what classes my advisor told me to register for, and I couldn't. So instead, I just kind of winged it using the chart I found at CSU. Just ignoring what classes I actually should have registered for. So that was a bit stressful, but looking back, I almost got it right. I registered for one class different from what my advisor planned for, but, I think I did pretty well overall. After the registration debacle, I then joined my family for a trip to Estes, which was really nice. We had this really good lemon bread at the Ink and Brew, and man, that stuff was fantastic. Other than that, we kind of just walked around with no real place to go. Talked, ate some good pizza, and overall it was just a very relaxing experience. So yeah, it was nice. Once I got home, I decided to go rollerblading down Sprinklr Trail, and it was perfect weather. It was also super relaxing and therapeutic because, as always, I had my instrumental music. So yeah, that was great. Dad came and picked me up once I reached the end of the trail, so I didn't even have to blade back, which I was waiting for. Then once I got home, I watched some AMVs before going to bed, and that was the day. I went to church the next morning, and we were going to do Magic, but Johanna pleaded with us on account for some reason I forgot to not play Magic, and instead we all talked around the table. I then did D&D at Neo's, which was normal, ate food, and then John, Alan, Neo, Sydney, and I all did a YouTube compilation movie night, where instead of watching a movie, we all chose like 20 minutes of YouTube videos and shuffled them together. Overall, I really enjoyed that experience. However, I shall say that John's choices were very weird, bordering on disturbing. However, apart from those, and some of Neo's childhood videos, which I did not need to tear, apart from those, it was a pretty enjoyable experience. Next morning began by a much-needed run. It's dumb how slower I get after not running for like a month. I then trained in the idea to Product Lab, because I now have access to the printers, and I got access to them over the summer as well, which, I could have gotten access to them over the summer as well, but that would require putting like 20 reservations in, which would effectively mean printing one day of the week every day until school ceased. And I realized really quick I just couldn't swing that. So as it stands, I'll have to wait till next semester to get access to those again. But still, the Idea Product Lab is a really cool resource. So many PLA printers with unlimited PLA for free. Man, actually, so much potential. After I did that, I found out my class grade dropped by 6% because I hadn't realized a homework assignment existed, and, I just got a 0 on it. And it was very vexing. It feels very unjust when forgetting something drops your entire grade 6%. Like, that's just dumb. I then worked on the Mech 200A midterm, which was just beginning of a very long and grueling assignment. I then came into work and discovered that I was it was Student Employee Appreciation Day, so that was fun. They made like a balloon launch instead of decorations and stuff, and so they gave us a little pack of Oreos and like other sugary death items that only, existed to tempt me. Also, there were Lamar's donuts, and those were so tempting. Like, I almost caved. It turns out such sweets were not actually a gift, at least to me. But as they say, one man's donut is another man's temptress from hell. However, somewhat ironically, as a reward for my resistance, I bought myself Wendy's. After eating some Wendy's, I then did CAD work for 3 hours as Alan gave his Protestant presentation. I finally finished after an hour after the talk ended. All that CAD work was part of the Mech 200A project, by the way. Since, of course, my brain was good and dead at that point, I then gave Liam a very brief talk on metaphysics, and then once I got home, I collapsed and watched anime until it was time to sleep. That Tuesday was entirely standard, with the exceptions being that I got to do data entry at work, which was mind-numbingly boring. I also did 3D printing on the printers, and unfortunately that failed because my file wasn't the right type. I then went over to Joe's, where Noah and me and Joe went on a walk because the weather was lovely, and Joe talked about the details of the upcoming pre-release, and that was an okay time. Then, once we got back, Ben and Caleb joined Joe, Karina, Ben, me for some volleyball over at CSU. We picked up this random other guy whose name I forgot, but, overall it was a good time. It turns out Noah's toes have a power that was previously unknown to mankind, but finally, their true strength has been released. However, apparently, Ben was one of the dark side, as he strongly opposed the outflow of Noah's toe power, because Noah was being Noah and everyone was staring due to his Noah antics. And this made Ben deeply uncomfortable. Other than that instant, though, I think we had a good time. Though, man, that sand hurt my feet. Very unpleasant. Once we got back, we watched a bit of a furry, and then we all went our separate ways and slept. I slept in the next morning, but otherwise, it was a typical Wednesday. I did, however, decide to not do some math homework, and instead did other homework until 6:15. After that, I spontaneously hung out with Ben and Grace. At this time, Ben was doing a gig for the newest Toyota car, and thus he had a car on loan, and while it was basically just your standard commuter car, it was a very new standard commuter car, and therefore not your standard commuter car by standards. And it could go faster than any other car we've driven. That was pretty cool. He drove us around in it. We got some drinks from Beaver's Market before going down to the old town library, just chilling on the playground and talking. However, unfortunately, Ben made Grace mad, so it kind of got tense near the end. Regardless, it was good. I think it's important to have time where you have nothing scheduled and just chilling with the people that matter to you. Anyway, after that, Nia was free, so he and I went on a walk and we talked, and that was nice. And then, once we got back, I went to bed. The next day, I woke up super early not just super early, just early, because I thought I had to. But I, in fact, did not have to. I then did a lot of work on paper for something, superheated some metal with some acetylene torches, and then smacked it in the shape of a screwdriver with the drop forge. Once I got home, I watched some anime with the fam, did some more work on the aforementioned paper, then helped Grace before discovering some AI stuff. The day thereafter was super chill, which was big bueno. I got to take a bath that morning, which was very nice, before my whole day started. During that day, I tried to get my boss of HPCL, to invest in some AI software to automate the data entry process that I had previously been, doing, because it's super mind-numbing work. But she said no. Not because it wouldn't work, but because it was actually cheaper to have us students do it, as she had to employ us either way, because, regardless of data entry, you need someone at the front desk. And thus, why pay extra when she could just have us do the former? And I mean, granted, her logic is sound, but I personally would much rather do homework between things rather than data entry. Just saying. Thus, my persuasion check did not meet her to see, and so life went on. After the rest of the typical Tuesday activities, I went over to Joe's house where we played some Magic games before going on a All Will Be One pre-release, and we all just did garbage. Noah was the only one out of like the 9 of us that did any good. Still, it was cool to have such a large group. In the end, we had Braden, John, Sydney, Neo, Joe, Sam, Benj, Noah, and myself, which I think is everyone. However, the loss was especially crushing for Joe since he had put in a ton of work into the set and had done like a ton of research, only to go and play his worst pre-release event ever. The other thing is all of us like were kind of annoyed by Griffin's lack of systems, so we had like manually enter our scores and stuff, and it was, made the whole event take way longer than usual, and hence we were there until literally 3 in the morning, so that sucked. Saturday, we had our family thing planned to be done at the Wades, so I slept until like 30 minutes before our departure, and then we left around noon. It was very peaceful driving up there. I don't know if I've like talked about this, but I have a unique love of sitting in the back of the car for long car rides. I think it might be because like nothing's expected of me, even by myself, and since I can't do anything productive except stare out the window, or else I'll get car sick, it's a time when I'm both internally and externally permitted to do nothing important whatsoever. I mean, I've been really busy with school as of late, so external permission is a bigger deal these days. But I think what makes a car ride uniquely like valuable is it's my internal permission. Basically, I have an omnipresent nagging desire to do meaningful things with my life. So it's never like the case that I'm not doing meaningful things, even if no one expects anything of me. I grow genuinely uneasy if I'm just like doing something I'm like, this isn't worth my time. I mean, that's not to say I don't ever waste my time. I definitely do. But whenever I do, there's always this nagging sense that I should be doing something better. And oddly enough, that nag compounds the longer it goes unfulfilled. And almost always, when enough time passes, it grows so annoying it motivates me to be productive in the end. Anyway, the point of saying all that is that the car rides were one occasion where I can think of off the top of my head where the nagging productivity sense just goes away completely. I'm pretty sure I could find some like childhood rude reason for that, but regardless, it's the case. And thus, backseat car rides are probably the most relaxing environment for me that I'm aware of. So yeah, all that to say, the drive was nice. Once we got there, we just kind of sat around, did nothing most of the time. I did ever get to shoot David's semi-automatic, I don't know what it is, maybe a submachine gun. I don't know guns. But I do know anime, and so I'm going to identify this gun the only way I know how. It looked like that, but not pink, and also not quite the same. But still, mostly like that. Anyway, it was a very fun gun to shoot. By far my favorite gun to shoot I've shot so far. I had like no recoil, and a semi-auto function that made it basically feel automatic. It was just very enjoyable. Also, I beat David in one round of our shoot-off. We also played some airsoft games, and those were fun. We made this game mode where one of us, me, had the flag, and the other 3 players were trying to kill me and get the flag back to the respawn. However, because they were against one another as well, they were also trying to kill one another as they tried to kill me. So that made for some very interesting dynamics. Ben ended up winning in the end, but only because I was either a really, really bad shot or my gun failed me. I'm inclined to believe the latter, but it's possible that the former was the case. Regardless, we all ran very hard that last game, and it was a good time. But Ben ended up with a nasty cough. Once it came in for that, we all sat and listened as Aunt Becky read these funny stories from this book. Honestly, kind of reminds me of Life of Demos in style. On rare occasions, when my Life of Demos are actually funny. What else? Let's see. Oh, we got to hear about Sam's traumatizing time in the army. It actually sounded super horrible. I'm never going to join any military branch. And then the only other thing that happened was we watched Emperor's New Groove. And despite that movie being as old as I am, it's still so good. Like, such a solid movie. Like, the creators of that were just geniuses. After that, the nightly chicanery took place. Oh, I also beat Mom in the existence of a word. Chicanery. I don't know. Apparently I forgot the word I used. Mostly because it involves a lot of smacking each other with pillows. But this time, there was some notable toe breathing that occurred. Also a lot of sketch jokes, which I, very much did not like to hear. However, the night was good. The only unfortunate part was it got really cold, and I only grabbed myself a thin blanket, so I didn't really get good sleep at night at all. The next day, I woke up early and just kind of sat around after breakfast. We then all helped set up the tents on 2 tent platforms that have been up there. One which the squad is responsible for building, might I say. And the Wades think that we did a way better job than Sam's junk college buddies. So, I mean, that bar is not particularly high. But still, they like our tent platform better. Although, I'm just going to be honest. I took a look at both of them and I really could not tell the difference. So I'll just take their word that ours is better. Once we got those tents up, I then got to shoot David's gun some more, which was big fun. And then that was it. We drove back down, and unfortunately my stomach was feeling very not good, and so it was not relaxing like the way up. But once we got back, I got to take a bath, and then made my life better. I then helped Grace with the mask she procrastinated on, did some small things to entertain myself, and then I started an anime, which is absolute fire. It's called Blue Lock, and it's a soccer anime, and for the first time, it actually got me hooked. I haven't been hooked on anime for half a year. Actually fantastic. But by the time it was time to go to bed, it got me so fired up, I went on a mandatory run, just out of compulsion. It made me want to play soccer again so bad. Also, in case you couldn't tell, I gave it a 9. Then, of course, once I'd expended the pent-up energy via the exertion of my legs, I slept. That Monday I slept in, did my typical work and classes. After all that all ended, I did homework and went to Ratio, where I got to talk with Alan for a bit before spending the rest of the night watching some more Blue Lock. Tuesday was just the usual Tuesday, upon which I reached Joe's house. Once there, we did another mini Among Friends pre-release, and that was good. And that night, I continued to feed my Blue Lock addiction. Wednesday morning, I had math tutoring, picked up my clock, which you've already seen a picture of, ate food and watched some anime, and then used ChatGPT to help me write a paper. And actually, something crazy happened as I did that. See, ChatGPT isn't connected to the internet, so it can't actually cite sources. However, since I was brand new to ChatGPT, I didn't actually realize that I couldn't ask it to cite sources. So, to start off, it provided me with this link to a source that was exactly what I was looking for, and it helped me with my paper. And as I kept asking for sources, I became confused because none of the other links would work. Well, it turns out the first link it gave me, which is another example of like large language model generation, just so happened to be the exact same name as a real paper someone wrote. So it's not like ChatGPT knew that the actual paper like existed from its training data. Rather, just so happened to make a particular title from a particular journal that would likely have the kind of paper, was trying to find. And it turned out someone else chose the exact same title in the exact same journal. Like, what are the odds of that? So the link was actually real. So yeah, that was pretty crazy. But the article was real and valid, so I ended up using it, and it really helped me out. After that 1 in a million occurrence, I then did more classes, decided to approach some of my classmates about forming a team to work on a differential Q project, and they agreed, and then did work. I finished my Mech 200A paper and then just chilled for a bit. However, after that, I then went to a review session for ECE before my dead brain finally made it back home, and I joined the new Minecraft server that Neo had started. Then, of course, as is practically mandatory at this point, I ended my day with some Blue Lock. The following morning, I took my ECE exam. Felt great, and get this, actually did great! 94, baby! After the average score of like 65 or something. See, I'd be much more proud of that accomplishment if it weren't for the fact that I'm painfully aware that last semester I was below that 65% average. So, yeah. A victory is still a victory, though. I then ate food and tried to get hold of my DiffyQ lab partner, which didn't work. And honestly, I don't know what else I'm going to do that day. Or else I did that day. I'm sure it was normal, though. Friday, I tried to go to math torture, but to my chagrin, the torturing room was bereft of torture, despite the posted schedule. And thus I went home, and since my stomach was hurting, I took a bath. I have a theory that maybe my stomach hurts when I get stressed. I'm not sure, but there seems to be a correlation, so maybe that's it. Regardless, I chilled at home for a bit before going to work and classes, and then ironically, I learned nothing in dynamics, because all I could think about was playing soccer later that evening. You actually don't understand how much Blue Lock hyped me up to play soccer. The anime is so good. I mean, look at this. Like, this is how the actual anime looks, and that isn't even the coolest part. It's just such a good show. Any soccer fan needs to watch it. So yeah, because I knew the same thing would just happen if I stayed for my DiffyQ class, because let's be honest, learning differential equations is very far from watching, it's about equivalent to watching paint dry. I then left early and went home and watched Blue Lock instead of doing anything else, and then did that until it was time to leave for soccer. I was actually shivering with excitement. Benj and Ben joined me for soccer, and it was a ton of fun. We found out this other group of young adults with a pretty low skill level, like most people at Friday Night Soccer, and we fought off against them. And Ben, me, and Benj all had some really good plays, and it was just really good to be back on the field. Gosh, I was actually so sore afterward, though. Not even funny. On the way back, I intended to just drop Benj off at movie night, but Ben and I ended up staying and eating pizza, because who can turn down free pizza? I then got home and got to work on an AMV, and for like the next 6 hours, that's what I did. Here is the final product. The next day, I worked on some Magic deck building, spontaneously joined Joe at Spencer, Joe's friend's house, to check out their D&D campaign, because Joe was like, you should join. And I was like, okay. So I sat in on the session and kind of observed, which was pretty boring. But it did allow me to think of a character that I would think would fit the vibe pretty well, so that was good. It was a very chaotic campaign that Spencer is running. Very open world, and the players are very close to your traditional new player murder hobos, so not a sophisticated campaign by any means. But it seems like, it could be mildly interesting. It'll be my first time playing without structure, because John and Neo always have a story, even if you choose to reject it. Also my first time playing a non-good character, so that could be a brand new experience. Once I got back from that, I did Magic card sorting before watching the Minion movie with the fam, and I might say it was absolute garbage. Wasn't even entertained. I cannot stress just how bad movies are compared to anime. After that, I went on an AI frenzy, learning all these cool AI tools and what they could do. I'm kind of hoping I can use this software called Descript to read my life dates with my voice. And all I have to do is put in text, but it turns out my voice is not the most fakeable. I've seen some people where it just gets their voice almost perfectly, but I guess I talk so quickly and slur some of my words that the script just gave up. Kind of funny that having bad diction may actually be a boon in the rising world of AI, since you're really hard to deepfake. The next day I went to church at Southgate and talked with Karen Lawless a little bit. She's definitely an interesting person, even though she hasn't done any interesting things as of late. And then, because I hadn't brought my Magic cards to church, I then took a drive with Karina and Johanna to go back and grab my cards and just talk with them some. Honestly, I enjoyed that. At least it's more memorable than Magic. However, once I got back, of course, I played Magic. I then arrived at the Balance House for Neo's pseudo-birthday. We did birthday-esque things and played some Frisbee games where I almost lost to Alan. He's pretty good at Frisbee. Neo's parents were there, and they were kind enough to sponsor some free food for us, so that was nice. Oh, and also Neo and Alan and I all played a game of Polytopia as well. Once that all ended, we watched a bit of anime with Grace, or I watched a bit of anime with Grace, and then worked on using some of the AI tools I found earlier to generate art that I've been wanting to generate for editors, and I did it at like 12:30. But man, check this stuff out. Boom. That's my new insignia. It took a lot of tries, but I'm really happy with the result. Also, a few more pictures in the vein of the themes that I've made. Woo! Aren't those so cool? Who needs artists when you can just do that by typing words? Like, actually so cool. If you're interested in the AI I use, it's called Midjourney, and to my knowledge, it's the best out there so far. It costs like $10, and it gives you 270 something prompts, so it's effectively like 2.7 cents per prompt. Which, when you're making images like this, that's much cheaper than hiring an artist, my friend. Trust me, been there, done that. The other thing I did with AI was face swap stuff, which I'm not going to lie, was pretty creepy. By far the most disturbing / intriguing feature was a gender swap. So here's the image I gave it. And here's what it gave me back. Whoop. Not going to lie, I think I make a pretty attractive female. But that's in large part due to the software, I'm sure, because when I put the female back through me to remailify myself, aside from the fact that, like, I had a very hard time with the whole half of my hair being covered by, or half of my face being covered by hair. It also did not look much like me. They must use some like objective attractive making features of the other gender and add them regardless if you would actually realistically have them. But still, nonetheless, I'm pretty trippy to see myself feminized. Honestly, kind of disturbing. However, the app has a more pragmatic feature, like seeing what you would look like with long hair. Or with a beard. And see, I'm now very convinced I would like a beard. But some counterfactuals are not destined to remain counterfactuals. Or are destined to remain counterfactuals. Because the beard right there comes out of pure mythology. At least currently, there's no way I could possibly grow that. All I could grow would be a flowing mane of neck hair. Anyway, that was an interesting tangent to travel down. What do you guys think? Should I go for long hair? I'm thinking maybe so. Also, side comment, never really saw this before, but I totally have a left lazy eye. Like, it's not open to the same degree my right eye is. You kind of wonder how I've never noticed about myself until now. The next day I did math torture, watched a bit of anime as I ate, did work and school things, and then just scraped all my progress with my CAD model for my final project and started over. Then at Ratio, we had some higher ups show up, and that was awful. They totally ruined the whole session of Q&A, and it was when we had new people genuinely interested in Christianity too. They've been promised a Q&A time, and instead they got to listen to a lecture about how the world's going to trash by old people, and it really hurt my soul. However, thankfully, I got a convenient excuse to leave because William, the great Varley, called and had some philosophical questions. And so instead, I talked with him. And that was really good. However, during that conversation, I realized how rusty I'd gotten about like the whole non-Thomistic things. Like utilitarianism and deontology just haven't been live options for me for so long, since Thomism and I've had natural law, that I really fallen out of practice concerning them. But yeah, realizing how much I'd forgotten was definitely a bit disturbing. Still, it was good to talk with William, and he had some good questions, to be sure. He's begun down the philosopher's path, and I'm pretty pumped. Once that ended, I decided to find I came back to find the same old guy's rambling scenario that I just described. And so I showed up, and then I left. There was really no point in me staying for that. Once I got home, Joe showed up and helped me deck build a little bit before battling our decks off against one another. And despite Joe's deck having super expensive cards and mine being entirely made of bulk, my deck totally destroyed his in a 1v1. I mean, to be fair, his was built for multiplayer, but I still was pretty happy with the result. To that end, to end that night, I experimented with one more AI tool that I discovered in my craze of AI research. An AI that measures attractiveness. Honestly, it seems like there aren't many good AIs out there that actually, are good at judging where you rank on the population scale. But I found one that seemed pretty legit. Now, yes, this was partially out of pure curiosity, but there was also a pragmatic value, as it's super proven that your physical attractiveness determines a lot of factors in social interaction. Thus, it seems wise to me to know where I'm at so I can act appropriately. It's like a first impression fitness test. It tells you where you are, and thus you can, use that as a benchmark to set reasonable goals. Also, I figured if, against my expectations, I ranked highly, then it might be worth my time to invest in trying to get to, a fashion style and leverage my looks. I found AI fashion tools too. But if I ranked averagely, there's not much point in trying to polish a mad diamond. And instead I should, just keep doing what I'm currently doing, which is, trying to have enough hygiene / fashion that people think me normal, not below average. So that was my motivation, and it turned out the latter of the case was true. Honestly, I'm not sure if I would have believed the former case even if it occurred. And apparently I'm a solid 6.7 on a scale of male attractiveness, which, for context, that's the top range is that's considered the average range. See, how the tool works is it takes the previously, a lot of previous survey data, I assume from peer reviewed studies, but I actually couldn't find out where they got their data, where males and females rank attractiveness of faces on a scale of 1 to 10. And then, of course, the surveys vary things like face shape, eye distance, nose to mouth ratio, stuff like that. And they're basically able to formulate optimal values and states of affairs for what people would perceive as maximally attractive, with separate criteria for males and females. Then the AI identifies where your face lies on each of these spectrums, and then generates a composite score of your face's attractiveness based on all the scientifically proven attractiveness matrix data. I gave it 10 different images, being sure to vary the angle and expression widely, and the score it gave me back varied by about plus or minus 0.5, with the average being about 6.7. Turns out, if you give it this face, the attractiveness rating goes down. Who'd have thunk? So yeah, the AI seemed pretty consistent and legit, and so I surmised that my facial attractiveness is probably, on the high end of the considered average by most people's scale. I think that was for both males and females, by the way. Thus, some useful information that has genuinely affected a few small things in my life, and given me a good reason to not invest in fashion. The next day I had class and got a small break before going to my CAD lab, but I honestly just screwed myself over. For some dumb reason, I chose the Oculus controller model, and if you know what an Oculus controller looks like, there is not a more irregular, whack controller in existence. Like, everything about that controller is just so hard to model. Heck, they even put the handle at like a 5 to 8 degree angle from perpendicular to the head. Like, why? Was that really necessary? I feel like whoever was tasked with modeling this controller was like, make it so that it has 10 really weird features so our competitors can't copy us. Like, actually, such a pain to model in so many ways. After the lab, I went to work, tried to get SolidWorks down on my computer, but kind of failed as I had this fancy license the school gave me, though of course I didn't know that I had been given the license the entire time I actually needed the CAD software. The fact that, I could have used SolidWorks on my personal computer instead of going to the computer lab every time I wanted to model something the entire semester, but didn't, is just fascinating. But anyway, I attended Neo's legit, birthday party and ate real good bacon wrap jalapeno poppers. Like, holy cow! City's jalapeno poppers are glorious. Very good. Then, per Neo's birthday request, we played Diablo for 4 hours or something. Not my favorite game, but it wasn't bad. My big problem is that, at least with my knowledge of the game, I'm just button mashing. But then, once that finished, I went home and went to bed. The next morning, I worked on the DiffyQ math project with my teammates that I had acquired previously. I then did working classes, but I skipped math because class was just not very informative. I then went to Neo's where we worked on some more modeling of that stupid, I did, of Oculus controller. And then we took a break for anime, and I got right back to modeling after that. I should have taken pictures. Oh, actually, I do have pictures. Look at that. Boop. Model. You can see how my model matches up with the thing. As you can see, I messed up in some areas, but overall, I think I did well. The other thing to keep in mind is that this was all modeled with surfaces. Not a single body was used, which makes it way hard, just so you know. Anyway, by the time it was 9:30, I finished the general body and called it a day and just played Magic until 11. And then went home and generated more AI images. The next day, after my morning session of classes, I did things around the house, cleaned up my Rocketbook notebook, which took a whole hour. And to be fair, I got all the notes in the drive first, so that was a good chunk of the time. But still, an hour is a pretty long time. Makes me wonder if these reusable notebooks are worth it. I then went back to school, got pseudo-math tutoring, but basically not, and then did voice training with Sydney. I'm pretty sure we did harmonization stuff, so that was actually really cool. She started teaching me how to harmonize, which is very fancy. After that, I left to do homework, and I did that. I think until 9 o'clock. And then I just sorted instrumental music and made AI art. Friday morning, I got to sleep in, which was very nice. I then did the usual with the exception of skipping DiffyQ. However, I took that extra credit hour and had a very nice day that just presented itself to me. So I walked in the creek. I see. I skipped DiffyQ and I took the extra. Okay. Honestly, it was a really good time. Just listening to quality instrumental music and walking in the creek can be very enjoyable. I genuinely think it's a shame that when you get older, things like walking in a creek just don't occur to you as live options. But, they were when you were small. I think it takes I think there's some serious value to breaking out of our day-to-day to do childish things. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, along my creek venture, I found this guy. It's a crawdad with one arm. He's apparently had a hard life, so I didn't abuse him too much. However, catching him was probably one of the easiest things I've done in my life, and at that moment, all my childhood respect for Ben just evaporated. See, believe it or not, I'd never caught a crawdad before with my bare hands because I was sure they would pinch me. And thus, whenever Ben would do it, I would reasonably be impressed. But it turns out these guys are not hard to catch at all. If you grab them where I did in the picture, they can't even reach you, so your odds of getting pinched are exactly 0. So yeah, the experience was enlightening in numerous ways. I also found $3 in coins, so that was cool. And I found this, a dark tunnel. A series of large water pipes going under the city. I didn't go in too far since exploring pipes wasn't explicitly my goal, and it was kind of painful to crawl around. But I do want to go back with Benj and explore them sometime. Among my other notable experiences, I found mud that can be very deep. I actually got almost stuck. I sunk in to my mid-thigh. It was very deceptive, that spot, because the water was only 2 inches deep, as you can see. So how was I supposed to know the mud went that deep? And that concludes all the mildly novel things that happened during my creek adventures. Otherwise, there's just a lot of walking in water, pushing through foliage, and listening to fantastic music. After 2 hours, Dad came and picked me up on the way back, and Mom got Mom some pain medication. Yeah, Mom actually had a tooth abscess, the same thing I had a year or so back that was actually the worst. But apparently they couldn't save the tooth, so they just pulled it. She was in a ton of pain, and the situation overall just sucked. Though to be honest, she handled it way better than I did, or she was in less pain. Once I got home, I had food, and I watched some YouTube videos with Mom trying to distract her. I also gave her access to my Ultimate Please playlist, which is the composite playlist from Peace, Flight, Heart, and Tragic categories that contains all my favorite songs. And she said that playlist was the only thing that made her... that playlist was the only thing that made her be able to drive home from Denver. So I'm glad that was able to help her. Other than that, I just built magic decks, did AI stuff, and then discovered that I aced my AC second midterm, so that felt great. The next day was Saturday, and though I knew that the week thereafter was going to be hellish, I only did a little work on my case study that was due the next week, and then spent the rest of the day playing Minecraft and listening to Pints Aquinas. There was some very interesting stuff said on the Shroud of Turin, and I'll probably look into that sometime. Sunday, I felt sick, so I took it easy. I've learned resting is super helpful when you get a sickness. I mean, it might seem obvious, but in the past, I was functional, so I would carry on with life as normal. But as of late, I've realized if I feel a little bit sick, I can go into hyper rest mode, and it actually makes the scenario so much better for my future self. So there you go. Some anecdotal advice for you right there. I built some magic decks in the sun for a few hours, and actually found out that I got sunburned later. I then spent a lot of time playing Minecraft and listening to Pints Aquinas, and also watched some Dr. Stone with Mom. After dinner, I did more Minecraft, and then spent the rest of the day watching science videos and trying to figure out if I could get AI to trade stocks with for me. Unfortunately, it looks like the options are pretty limited in that regard. There are a few platforms that have something along the lines of what I was just looking for, but there are very few that allow the AI to enter and exit the market. Most just have AI advising systems. We have to manually do all the trading. Also, even for those few that do allow for the process to be fully automated, from some of the reviews I watched, the bots don't always perform well. Thus, at least from what I can tell, AI stock trading isn't yet at the point where I can enter and make cash without getting significantly educated in the subject and devoting a lot of time. Thus, that's probably not going to happen. Monday was packed. I had math tutoring in the morning, had a cough, and still felt sick. But, it was the week before finals, the week when my projects were due, so I just couldn't not do those. Thus, I had no real choice but to push through. However, thankfully, I did feel somewhat better as the day wore on. I did a ton of homework that day. However, when I would usually go to Ratio, I did not, because Neo and John didn't want me to contaminate their underlings. So I instead stayed home and worked on magic decks. I also hung out with Grace, sort of in addition to learning how to create better AI images, only to then run out of credits. And that was my day. Tuesday, I still felt bad. I basically ignored the lecture in ACE, did homework, to do homework, though I definitely should have paid attention because given my later test score, I then got close to finishing the project for some class. After that, I totally failed my part 1 CAD test, but for super dumb reasons. See, the test just uses the software you download on your personal computer and it tests you, right? But because it was my personal computer and not a school computer, SolidWorks was different. And thus, when it was wanting me to use a certain material to give my answers in, which without it, I can't answer the question, I thought my personal computer didn't have the material. When it actually did, it was just under a slightly different name. And thus, I wasted a non-negligible amount of time just trying to find said material. Then, of course, likely because I couldn't find the material and I was stressed, I made some errors in my modeling and spent way too much time trying to make a tangent curve work when I could have, for all practical purposes, used a center point arc. Anyway, the other thing is there's other things I messed up on too. The point is, what happened is I ended up taking too long on the first 2 problems, and though I was able to figure them all out in the end to get them right, there wasn't enough time for me to actually answer the last 2 problems. But what was really dumb, and the thing I'm salty about the most, is that the last 2 problems were worth the same amount as the first 4 problems. So even though I got all the first 4 problems I did correct, I only got 50%. And that's the other dumb thing. I totally knew how to do everything on the test. Part 2 of the test, which was way harder by the way, I got a literal perfect score. A perfect score! With 30 minutes to spare. It's just because I freaked out on the first test and didn't use my time well that I got that grade. I knew how to do everything. And the worst part is that you need above a 70 on both parts of the test to get the certification. That's your chances of being hired for an internship. Even though I got over a 70, that first screw up means I didn't get a certification because 1 test wasn't over a 70. So, not to, mention it would have given me an A in the class, and I got a B instead. So all that to say, it was just made very vexing by the fact that I didn't get a single question wrong, I just didn't have the time. So yeah, it super sucked. Once I got home, I watched anime and self-pity, and then went over to Joe's house for typical Tuesday night things, which included watching Bofuri and playing Magic. Wednesday, I did math early in the morning, and we worked with my teammates to get the DiffyQ project done. Just to jump ahead, we actually got a 95 in the end, so we did really well. But yeah, worked on that with them. We then spent some extra credit time for my Mech 200B class, where I failed the clock project with a 51, by the way. And to my surprise, I got accused of cheating and faking the crib shift, which I actually did do those. Honestly, it was a super weird experience for me. I can't remember the last time, if any time, anyone has ever accused me of lying. Everyone who knows me just knows lying isn't something I do, and I'm extremely adverse to it. And so no one ever doubts me on that front. So I just had to have someone accuse me of not telling the truth, or perhaps for the first time I can remember, it really messed with me. I mean, he was able to figure out I actually did the curve shift, though not because of some kind of proof. Instead of being able to get reasons, I was just kind of shocked he was accusing me of lying, but rather because he gave his evidence and he realized his evidence was bad. But despite that, the whole event really messed with me. I know I did the crib shifts. Not only do I recall it, but I have proof in these life emails. But for the entire rest of the day, I was like, did I lie about that? It was just the weirdest experience. I promise you I was there. Even now, the fact that someone doubted me, though, still makes me feel like maybe I wasn't. Maybe they know something I don't. Maybe I'm just deceiving myself. It's honestly the strangest thing. I never felt so uncertain of what I'm intellectually certain of before. So the moral of the story is, don't ever accuse me of lying, because apparently it will seriously mess with my psyche for actual days. I don't know. Maybe do it though, so I can get like exposure therapy and not have this whack reaction. Because I know he was wrong, but still. Anyway, whatever. The moral is that it's extremely unpleasant and a surprising experience. That's for the rest of the day. That was on my mind. But aside from that, I did just classes and homework. Once I got home, I got Mom started on Midjourney so she too could make AI art. And then I went to Neo's where we watched anime and ate Panera. After that, Neo, Sydney, Joe, Benj, and Noah and I all played Emperor over at Joe's house, which was especially a mode of Commander. And then once I got home, I went, I had a spontaneous desire to thank my front range teacher. But despite like half an hour of searching, I wasn't able to find her contact info, so I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Then after that, I went to sleep. The following Tuesday, I had classes, as normal, though it was the last ECE Mech 200A class, so it was very nice. I then had my Mech 200B lab where I turned in my screwdrivers and got an 82, so not horrible. I then worked on my Mech 200A final project before doing my time at work. Once I got home from school, I watched a bit of anime, ate food, and then went back to campus for my EC final review, which only had like 5 students in attendance, which was very surprising, and which I thought I understood, so I left early. Clearly a mistake. I then talked with Mom before starting an anime called Eminence in Shadow. Don't ever watch Eminence in Shadow. It is by far the sketchiest anime I've seen, and I regret sticking around as long as I did. See, the thing is, my Alan, had talked up so much, and it honestly lived up to his report in many ways, that I tolerated a lot more sketch than I should have, before realizing it was just garbage. I swear, I had to look away from the screen for like 2 entire episodes. After that, I should have like stopped, but I did 3 episodes more before I dropped it. Which I will say is very sad, because it started out pretty clean, and it really did have such an interesting premise. Anyway, sketch anime aside, the next day I woke up early because my cough was so bad. I then felt sick, but at this point, I didn't really feel sick at this point, but I had a nasty cough. I used the extra 2 hours or so in the morning to work on my homework and also take a bath. Thankfully, I was able to get the final touches of Mech 200A project done. After that, I ate food and spent like 5 hours at work with the HES Fest, which is basically just an end of semester celebration with the health and exercise science that the health and exercise science department puts on. I almost crashed into a car with a golf cart, so that was fun. Once that was finally over, I came home, took a bath, watched some anime, and then worked on the live demo before watching Dr. Stone, a science anime, with Mom and Dad, and then going to sleep. The next day was Saturday, and I survived Death Week, so that was very big yay. I woke up at 8 and then drove to Deep Voice Noah's house, from which me and him carpooled to his cabin, one of Noah's friends owns up in the mountains. It was a pretty cool environment to play airsoft in, though the big difference is it was so dense that it meant a lot of up-close and thereby painful shots. Still, it was a good time, and good to change up the environment for sure. However, we stayed up there for till 3, and I'm almost certain I got dehydrated because I had a really bad headache for the next few days. Still, it was a good time. Also, at one point, we had to help the cabin guy haul concrete bags as kind of like payment for us using his place, and I realized I'm very weak. I really struggled with those 80-pound bags, and while I was able to haul them, doing so pushed my arms to the very edge of their ability. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I used my arms for literally nothing, but it was still kind of disappointing. Anyway, on the way back, Noah showed me this artist who wasn't too bad, and also happened, and so that happened. He's now on my It's Not That Bad playlist. There's currently 53 hours, just in case anyone wants to know, on that playlist. Once I got home, I took a shower and talked with William. After that, I watched much more of Dr. Stone with Mom and Dad while making chainmail. Yep, still doing that, just very, very slowly. And then I went to sleep. Sunday, I went to church, played some Magic, and also taught Katie how to play Magic. Did D&D, after which we went on a walk over to City Park, since Neo and Sydney live about as close as I do. And we laid on the grass and had a lengthy debate over the nature of cats. I'm not entirely sure what the point was, but it happened. I then came home and watched Dr. Stone with family before going to bed. Monday arrived, and the final week of school began. I woke up at 9 to go over to the library for a shared presentation thing that I had to do with some classmates, and that was fine. I then ate food and came back and did work for 5 hours, during which I studied and did homework, and did what homework remained. Then, once I was finally released, I went over to Joe's, and we bought and made our own food, as well as many decks out of some bulk we purchased. And while it was a good idea, the problem is there was a lot of white, and so we all just made lifelink decks. Thus, the game took forever to finish. After that went down, we played some spikeball and then volleyball at Rollmore Park, and I enjoyed that. Then once we got back, we worked on deck building some more, and then Seth, Noah, Sam, and I played our decks against one another. Tuesday, I got to sleep in, which was big nice. I took my final dynamics test and did horribly, but in that, me doing horribly meant I got about average, or 2 points below. So yeah, that was a bummer because my A- became a B+. I then went down to the EMEC and did a largely pointless end semester cleaning assignment for about 3 hours, so I wouldn't auto-fail to class, because like everything else, if you don't do it, just means you automatically fail. I then went to work, and after that, I went back to Joe's house to face our decks against one another. Those were some very long two-head giant games. After that, we went and played 6-person spikeball, which worked remarkably well. We also discovered that I am the Mosquito King. And then afterward, we finished out the night with some more two-head giant games. The next day, I worked on my final math project for 2 hours with Evan. Then around 12, Evan thankfully discovered the project was due at 1 p.m. instead of the previous 12 o'clock at midnight due date, which, Who makes a 1 p.m. due date? Like, that's weird. So we all scrambled to finish it and got it done just in time, barely. I then spent the rest of the rest of the day at work working on Life of Emails. And I also discovered my boss, Jess, won't be there for my future semesters. She got another job at Front Range Community College that pays a lot more, so she decided to take that. So yeah, a bit sad, mostly because who knows what my new boss will be like. And if, she lets me keep my cushy study job, or if she'll make me actually work, which granted is within her rights, I kind of get paid to do my homework, but whatever. I like that, so we should keep it that way. Then, once I got home, I sat on the front porch while the rainy weather began to set in, and I worked on this for quite a few hours. However, during that process, a person from Anime Club sounded an offer for free trading cards, because apparently those are a thing. And thus, for no particular reason, I biked over and sorted through 5,000 anime cards. I really don't know why I did it. I mean, I'm not going to use those anime cards for anything. And some of them I just chose because it looked cool. But I don't know. I guess it was an excuse to take a break after all the life of dating. Of course, once I got back, I got back to working on life dates. After that, I got some food, watched a bit of anime, took my EC final, and got 73, which is not great. But I still got an A in the class, so it didn't matter. Then, finally, I started working on another AMV, but I ended up just doing a lot of clip gathering instead. The next morning, I took the second part of my SWASA CAT exam and got a perfect score. I then returned my rental books and got paid $85 back, so that was sweet. I then went out to Five Guys with Dad and talked some, and then I had my last shift of work for the semester. I then went over to Neon Cities and we walked in the rain, which to be fair, I applaud them for both doing because I didn't really expect them to actually do it. It was nice though. Sydney got quite cold, but she stuck it out for my sake. I then did my usual thing where Neo and I got food, watched anime, and then thereafter Neo just talked about all the things he's been doing and playing in Minecraft for like an hour. He's a very enthusiastic Minecraft player. After that, I got home and joined the revitalized Rise of Christie Minecraft group where Katie, Liam, and I all caught up. However, I didn't end up actually playing Minecraft because Katie, in an effort to provide a reward that would sufficiently motivate me, pledged to watch the entirety of the My Little Pony series if I could find all 7 pony signs that she had hidden throughout my castle a while back. So, with that reward on the horizon, I spent 4 hours just looking for all those signs. I found 6 of them in like an hour, but the last one took me ages. However, just as Minecraft was wrapping up, I finally managed to catch it out of the corner of my eye. The charismatic blue-teal sign that I had not yet seen, and so doing, sealed Katie's fate. However, due mostly to availability, I only made her watch the first 4 seasons of my childhood show, as that's all that was available on Netflix. Now, the first thing that was deeply surprising was that Katie finished the entire 4 seasons of My Little Pony in a week. Like, that's a ton of My Little Pony. So I'm both impressed and a bit disturbed. But that entire week, I kept getting Discord messages complaining about this or that aspect of the show. To quote Lamentations 2:22 through 23 in the Katie translation, "The steadfast complaint of a woman never ceases. Her grumblings never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is her persistence." Some could just say it's the female translation, not particularly the Katie translation. But I, being a wise and prudent man, would never dare to suggest such a thing. So yeah, there was an exorbitant amount of My Little Pony in Katie's week, and vicariously in mine too. After that wrapped up, after Minecraft wrapped up, Liam and I decided to do a short anime quiz where he destroyed me, always deeply vexing, and then I slept, musing about my defeat. Friday, I woke up and tried to get this label printer that Dad had bought to work, and it was so much more difficult than it needed to be. I ended up spending like 2.5 hours trying to get all the thing to print the right size label, and even talking with the representative of the company, and at one time, I even allowed him to like hijack my computer to try and figure out the problem. Also, a side note, if you ever have never had someone remotely control your computer, it's a weird experience. Kind of feels like they're controlling your hand, or at least it did for me. Maybe it's just because my computer is like such an intimate part of my life that it feels like an extension of my person sometimes. So to have someone else not present just take control of it is just a very trippy experience. So yeah, I don't know what that reaction shows about me, but probably something insufficient. After finally getting it to print, though, the right label size, I stopped working for an anime reset, and then went over to soccer at Loveland Sports Park, since, Blue Lock reminded me of my love for soccer. I've been trying to play it every single week. And we played this game in the center circle that was basically like a 4-on-4 with these guys we met, and it was really fun. It was a totally different game, and made me use skills I really haven't used in a long time. I really enjoyed it, though. Unfortunately, there was an official game going on the pitch that we were using, so after that started, we had to leave, and we called it a day. Once I got home, I took a shower and went over to Sydney's house to help her draw on eggs. Then, once that finished, I watched some of My Little Pony with Grace, because Grace wanted Blast from the Past, and I wanted to see if Katie's complaints were justified. And honestly, it pains me to say it, but yes, I think they were. As a show, I could, grant that my gaze of My Little Pony might be colored through nostalgia, but rewatching it, yeah, I could see it was pretty bad. Honestly, most of Katie's complaints were justified. It's probably a 6 out of 10 kids show, and that's with me being a bit generous. Honestly, that was a bit disappointing to discover. I was kind of hoping it would be like really good, as I remembered it being, and all my persecutors could be put to shame by the objective quality. But alas, such was not destined to be. Thus, after that, Grace and I watched Kung Fu Panda 3 while chainmailing and embroidering respectively. That show is also garbage upon rewatch, but we rewatched some Akabe Sailor uniform after that. A slice of anime, I'm giving a 9, making my 7th 9 out of the 122 shows I completed this far. And that show was amazing because that kind of counteracted it. I mean, it's a slice of life, so if you don't like slice of life, then don't watch Akabe's. But it's a masterfully done slice of life. It just like instills peace into your bones, that show. And with that, the day came to a close, and yet another was prompted to begin. The next morning, I had quiet time because it was cold. I then worked on creating PDFs for so many labels for that label printer that I set up earlier, and did that for actually 5 hours straight. My wrists and shoulders got very sore from clicking the same things over and over and over again. However, during that entire time of label making, I also sorted through a ton of instrumental songs. Thus, my playlist got significantly longer. And while I have no idea how many hours they're at in total, that number should be increased by approximately 10 hours, as I listened to about half of each song before placing them. After I finished that, I started Blue Lock with Mom and Dad. Mom seems to like it quite a bit, so we'll probably watch that after we finish Dr. Stone. That evening, I got to catch up with Jordan, because now finals are done, and I finally had time, and that was good. Oh, and I should also share my final grades, which are as follows. Mech 200B, a C. ECE 204, an A. Math 304, a B. Civ 261, a B+. Mech 200A, an A. And Mech 201, a B. So yeah, overall pretty good. I got 1 C in my 1 credit class, so it's really just like a B- as far as my GPA is concerned. And the big thing for me is I managed to get an A in the class I failed last year, ECE, so that was epic. And yeah, pretty rewarding to see those grades because, man, I had to work hard for them since I'm averaging around like a B+, A-, which means my GPA will go up. And I don't have to worry about losing my scholarships, which is also a big relief. So yeah, there you go. My reward for way too much work is in 6 letters. Feels really meaningful when you put it like that. After talking with Jordan, I spent the rest of the night finishing my AMV. I started a little one that I started a while back, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Here it is. The next day at church, I didn't stick around, as I usually do, because it was Mother's Day, and Dad had decided we should take Mom out for dinner. However, I misunderstood just what was taking place, so I left church only to like have to wait 45 minutes for Mom and Dad's church service to end. So that kind of sucked. But still, worked out, and we, save Ben, got to gather some food. We got together for some food. After that, I went to Neo's because I thought that there was D&D, only to arrive and Neo be like, D&D's canceled today. And me to be like, oh. And then I walked back home. It was then that I learned the Myers clan was over the Jameses, so I decided to do a vibe session and walk over in the rain to Joe's house. Gosh, I cannot stress how nice that walk was. I mean, first off, the rain was great. But second, walking in that beautiful environment with fantastic instrumental music was just like the absolute best. I need to find a vibe session buddy who enjoys as much as I do. But so far, my search seems to be unprofitable. I found some people that mildly enjoyed, but they just don't seem to get the true essence of the vibe. Anyway, it was really nice. And then once I got the Jameses, I found out Karina and Joe were walking in the water, so I enjoyed them. I joined them. Then, after a while, we all headed inside, and from there we decided to go back outside and play a game of Ultimate Frisbee in the rain, which was pretty fun. My team started off by dominating, but the opposing team made an epic comeback and took the win by the end. Once we returned to the house a second time, I played a bit of Magic with Sam before Grace drove me home, and then I helped Mom learn Midjourney before Midjourneying myself, because I wanted to make a picture for my new AMV. I figured it would give, keywords a shot to see if I could reach a larger audience, and the answer was definitely no. Despite giving a cover image and some keywords, it was probably my least seen video so far, so it's kind of ironic. See, it would be pretty cool if my AMVs took off, but, I'm not really doing it because I want to see them succeed per se. I'm doing it because I enjoy it, so it'd just be cool if they, took off. Simple as that. Anyway, so maybe sometime I'll, consider marketing to the world later on. Then, after I posted that, I watched the 6th season of My Hero Academia until midnight. The next day started off with some much-needed introspection. I then began reading a 600-page book, which I'm working through about the history of the Gospels. And after reading it some, I then joined Joe in his trip to Udall's, where we played Magic with the Smiths. And Joe fulfilled his cat-sitting duties. Right after we got back from that, I went to Ratchet Christie's Alan, and the year party, and played a game of chess, only to once again lose to Ethan in chess. It was super dumb, too. Gosh, it was a dumb way to lose. Right after that, we played a game of Speed Seek where John legit put on a ghillie suit. I totally thought he was joking when he said he was going to break out his ghillie suit. But despite having 15 minutes to catch them, I just didn't catch any of them. I didn't find any of the 3 teams. Honestly, it was very painful. Probably my worst performance thus far. Still, I did get quite close on a few occasions and still had a great time, so nothing was lost. Then once I got home, I finished out the day by reading some more of my book. The next morning, I read for 2 more hours, took a break for food, read and worked on the Life Demo for 2 hours, and then put some Pies with Aquinas on and bladed around campus, trying to find all the places that I haven't spent much time in so I can recognize them better, aka training for the next speed game so I won't be defeated so soundly. Then, once I got back, I read some more until it was time to go to Joe's house for my typical Tuesday night activities. However, since Noah was gone, we decided we'd best watch an anime movie this time in addition to our typical Magic games. Oh, and Benji and I got this god-tier Wendy drink too. Wednesday was spent mostly reading. I took a 2-episode break for anime and then food, and then I got right back at it. And took another break for a 1v1 game of Speed Seek with Benj, wherein he lasted exactly 52 minutes before I caught him. And then I spent some time watching anime with a fan before going to Neo's for our typical Wednesday night hangout. We walked over to King Supers and got food, and then Neo made guac for me, only to discover cilantro is the leaf of death. Apparently, I have the same gene my mom has that makes it taste really bad because it was pervasive how much the guac was dominated by the cilantro taste. Hence, I ended up eating chips and salsa. After we just played Minecraft together, quote unquote, into the night, I placed together in quotes because we were in the same room, but very little communication occurred. We mostly did our own things. As for yesterday, I read about 3 hours until I got a text from Joe asking me to help them move. Oh yeah, the Jameses are moving. Forgot to mention that. Apparently, after never moving his entire life, which is impossible for me to imagine in the first place, Joe and his family are moving to Loveland. So it's kind of crazy and also unfortunate for me because him being close was very deeply convenient. But yeah, I came over and with great difficulty, we were able to move some big furniture. Then Joe decided to join me for a spontaneous rain walk, which involved unpaved mud trails, mud hills, and very pretty sights. And I really enjoyed it. Probably one of my favorite memories was just me and Joe. It was basically an ideal way to spend the afternoon. Once we came back, Joe's mom needed his car, so I agreed to take him to Noah's house for his cat duty. And while I just read some, he watched an anime. Then I came back to the house, faced off some of my magic decks against him, and did that briefly until I went home for the appointed time of dinner. Mom found these chicken nuggets that taste exactly like Chick-fil-A nuggets at Sam's Club, and they were fantastic. We then watched some Dr. Stone with the family before I joined in the now Thursday night routine Minecraft call, and that was how I rounded the day. And with that, I have finished what will once again be another massive life update email. Let's see if this one breaks the records. Oh my gosh, by a landslide. 22,308 words. Man, this is getting a little absurd. That's like half the length of my first novel right there. I really need to rethink my process for these. I mean, it's not like I wanted to write them this way. It's just that I genuinely didn't have time during the semester. At least be grateful I got a life update done during spring break. Like, otherwise length would have been literally novel worthy. Anyway, I think the number above provides ample evidence that I've said enough already. For everyone in New Zealand, in case I did not tell you, I'm coming over on the 5th of June to the 31st of July. So send me an email and we can make a meetup happen. And for everyone in America, I'll obviously be gone. Though Americans, the dates are the 13th of June to the 1st of August because that's how time works. And yep, that's all I have to say. Don't die.